Good day and welcome to the 75th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. Today I'm going to talk about the question whether Trump is irrational, unpredictable, you don't know what to expect. I will argue that's not the case. Um, when we look at Trump, you'll see he's very predictable. But if you use a liberal or even Marxist framework to analyze Trump, you would portray Trump as the fascist and the extreme right, and then we all need to mobilize against Trump and do everything possible to oppose all of his policies. If that's your vernacular, the way you look at Trump, you won't understand a lot of his actions. But if you take a DTM, decolonizing the mind approach, and you see this is about a dying civilization, then you'll understand, because within the dying colonial world civilization led by the US, there are two views on how to survive. One is the deep state view, which says we need to have military dominance, and that requires perpetual global war. And there's another view, which is Trump's and his entourage, that says let's retreat in nationalism, and this nationalism has a racist connotation, and focus on economic revival. And that means that we need to detach from perpetual wars because this brings economic downfall. So this is the basic analysis. Then you have to understand how the deep state works. What is the deep state? That is the military-industrial complex. And you have to understand that in the United States, the army is a combination of state and private enterprises. Nuclear weapons, for example, are not produced by the state. In fact, most weapons are not produced by the state. They are produced by private companies in the US. And the most important producers are Boeing. You know, the aircraft is not doing only aircraft. Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon. Now, an American author described how this deep state, how this defense is not defense, in tech companies, war companies, how they operate. And she gives an example of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which says, she says, she's like a business deal, orchestrated by and for Bush ideologues and their corporate friends in the military-industrial complex. She says Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon manufactured munitions that destroy Iraq. George Shultz, part of the government of Bush, was from Bechtel Corporation, and Cheney from Halliburton, and they were involved. These companies, led by people in the government of Bush, were rebuilding Iraq, and Iraqi oil pays for all of it. This is just corrupt infrastructure where government and private companies put their people and they get rich. In January 2022, Biden appointed Lloyd Austin as Secretary of Defense, a black man. And he had been on the board of Raytheon Technology since 2016. I mean, how can a defense contractor become the minister of defense in any civilized country? That would be regarded as the utmost form of corruption. And guess what? A study by Brown University concludes that between 2000, in 20 years, 2000 and 2021, the USA had spent 14 trillion on military defense. A trillion is a billion million. So it's a billion, and then you got the trillion, which is a lot of money. And of that 14 trillion, 2.3 was spent in Afghanistan. And they calculated that 1/4 to 1/3 of all the Pentagon contracts have just been gone to 5 companies: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman. This is unimaginable corruption. Now, Trump is saying, I want to reduce the military spending. He says there's no reason for us to continue developing new nuclear weapons where we already possess so many. One of my priorities will be to meet with President Xi and Putin to propose a mutual reduction of our military expenditures by 50%. Now, just take common sense. If you don't look at the racism and white superiority aspect of it, with its internal politics, but you would look at some politicians saying we need to cut down US spending by 50% on defense, what would you say as a normal person? You'd say it's a great thing. But because this is Trump, you're going to say it's not a great thing, it's a stupid thing to do. This is irrational policy. The person who's being irrational are those people who are criticizing the reduction of the defense industry. And the one who's being very rational is the one who says we need to reduce it. Now, Trump has learned from his first, period as President of the United States. He was always on the trajectory of reducing the military spending and the deep state, but then he came to the conclusion that Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, who were in his administration, Mike Pompeo as Director of CIA and Secretary of State, and then John Bolton as National Security Advisor, these guys were just obstructing all his policies. So he was seeing that within his administration, the deep state was very strong. In his second term now, he uses something which I draw from Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu, which is 2,500 years ago. He said, keep your friends close, keep your enemy closer. Now, guess what? Marco Rubio, who is a right extremist, a warmonger embedded in the deep state, became Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Secretary of State. How is that possible? Because this is the strategy that you have to understand. Keep your friends close and keep your enemy closer. Marco Rubio comes into the government of Trump and then has to lose all these warmongering things and have to abide by Trump. So Trump neutralized a part of the deep state. And then Trump brings in left-wing allies. Tulsi Gabbard was a former Democrat. Trump was also a member of the Democrat Party for 8 years, for 2001 and 2009. And she is now Director of National Intelligence, which that position is the executive head of the United States intelligence community, and they oversee the National Intelligence Program. And all intelligence community agencies, including CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and so they report directly to DNI, the Director of National Intelligence. So Trump put a left-wing person to oversee the intelligence community. And another left-wing person, the son of Senator Robert F. Kennedy Jr., also member of the Democratic Party, an environmentalist, a supporter of indigenous rights, he became Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now you look at Trump's administration and you see it is an ultra-right administration if you take a liberal and Marxist view. But if you look more clearly, it's not so easy to see that, because what is Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy doing there? So you have to understand that a pillar of Trump policy is an end to perpetual wars, which every left-wing person should be in favor of, and basically also an end to the global US empire, and focus on the reconstruction of the United States, which is the economic reconstruction, which is thing of make America great again with the racist elements of it. But don't let the racist element fool you about what is going on, which is the decline of Western civilization. You will now and then see crazy things. For example, a group of Republican senators introduced a bill to terminate the US membership of the United Nations, alleging that the body was developed into a platform for tyrants and a venue to attack America and their allies. I don't think this will go anywhere, but there's a reaction from BRICS. BRICS says already that we want the UN to reform. We want a comprehensive reform of the United States. And Dmitry Peskov says, it is impossible to imagine the Russians, Americans, French, German, and English agree to establishment of a new UN. There's no so publicity because if you abolish the UN, what comes in place of it? And nobody agrees on that yet. While other institutions like the BRICS are developing just parallel to it. So let's go to Ukraine. And then to understand Trump's policy, he just goes into a direct confrontation with those who hinder the peace in Ukraine. So he says of Zelensky, think of it, a modestly successful comedian, he talks about Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that could not be won, that had never had to start, built, but a war that he, without the US and Trump, will never able to settle. So he's saying this war, as any other war, this has sucked from the American people $350 billion. And then he says, Zelensky is a dictator without elections. Zelensky moves fast, or it's not, if he doesn't move fast, he will not have a country left. So he says Biden never tried, Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going, meaning the corruption. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky have done a terrible job, he says. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues. So, and now there have been negotiations between Russia and the US, Trump administration in Saudi Arabia. And then one member of the delegation, Kirill Dmitriev, from the Russian Direct Investment Fund, provided figures about who lost with the economic boycott of Russia. And he says the US lost 324 billions, 123 billions in the IT and media, 94 in consumer goods, 71 in finance, 26 in industry, and 10 billion in energy. Billion, I'm not talking million, billion. The US lost billions, and everybody who is talking, oh, we are going to sanction the Russians and we're going to make the ruble to rubles, and it's just nonsense. The facts are here, and Trump sees that. And Kirov gives specification. Exxon lost 4 billion, McDonald's 1.4, General Motors 657, Google 587, Coca-Cola 195, Disney 195, IBM 300, and it goes on and on and on. So the biggest loss was not only that the United States had to spend a lot of money in the war that could never won, but they even lost economically enormously through this war. And now they are trying to mend relations with Russia, but then the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia says, look, foreign companies will be allowed to return to Russia, but only if it benefits the country. And many vacant niches have already been taken by Russian producers or partners from friendly countries. So, and regarding technology, we will make sure that we don't rely again on on foreign technologies. So, mending relations with Russia doesn't mean that the US will instantly gain all these things that they have lost in Russia. So what does Trump do? He says, okay, who's going to pay for all these losses? And he says, Ukraine need to pay. Zelensky, he says, needs to sign an agreement with the United States that transfers critical minerals like aluminum, gallium, titanium, minerals that are essential for advanced technology manufacturing, such as semiconductors, and have significant military applications. That agreement need to be signed so that we get our money back through the minerals, which is classical colonialism, but the colonialism in this case, which is justified by we paid millions for your war, and now you need to repay us. Then they put pressure. First of all, they wouldn't transfer money anymore to Zelensky. There's some in the pipeline that's still going, but at the end of the day, he wouldn't. Then Elon Musk has Starlink, which is the satellite system that he owns and that the Ukrainian army used to coordinate military strike, to direct the drones, to exchange messages. And now Elon Musk is saying, I will, stop the use of Starlink by Ukraine army. So they put a lot of pressure. So there's a lot of context now. Since the meeting in Riyadh, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov says there are quite a lot of contacts between Russia and the United States now, and it doesn't take long to agree. There is a serious conversation on all matters that they had planned to discuss, including bringing the two countries' positions closer together. Now, mind you, Russia has signed a long-term strategic agreement with Iran. That means that when Russia talked to the United States and the Israelis saying we're going to bomb Iran, Russia is saying to the US, and the US will agree, that is not something you're going to do. So the whole Russia US coordination will prevent a new war to Iran, which Israel is insisting on. And then you see the fight back against the empire in Western Asia. Palestinian resistance through the Oslo deal, they show a kind of power. The resistance in the West Bank, Hamas is not dead, it's alive and kicking. Hezbollah has shown its strength with the funeral of Said Nasrallah, and Iran is building a regional alliance. When you look at the images of the funeral of Nasrallah and Hashem Safieddine, it was massive and it was a show of force. And then, very interesting is the meeting that Iran's leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei had with the Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. And first of all, the leader said, you have frozen funds transferred from Korea to Qatar, and the US is preventing the transfer from Qatar to Iran. So he says you need to do something on that, and you need to ignore the pressure of the US. And Tamim expressed appreciation for Iran's support of the oppressed people around the world, not only in Palestine, saying that Iran's unwavering backing of the Palestinians will never be forgotten. So you see a kind of thing where Qatar was basically anti-Iran is now coming closer to Iran. Then in the other part of the world, Latin America, formerly known as Latin America, Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of the United States, of Mexico, announced 2 constitutional reforms to prevent foreign intervention and impose harsh penalties on foreigners who intervene in her country. So Trump says, I've designated 6 drug cartels as terrorist organizations, meaning when they operate in Mexico, he might use military force. And then Sheinbaum comes back and says, hey, guess what? The people who are supporting those you call terrorists, who are giving them weapons, they are part of the terrorist network. So the terrorist network is in your country. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says that it will expand its lawsuits against arms manufacturers and sellers in the United States to accuse them of being complicit in terrorism. So here's a clever thing that Mexico did. You call the drugs cartel terrorists. So now we're going to put a lawsuit against those companies that support these terrorists in the United States. It's a marvelous set by Scheinbaum. Look at Venezuela. A special envoy for the Trump administration went to Venezuela, Richard Grenell, and assured that the President of the United States has no interest in promoting regime change in the world and that his main focus is the well-being of the US citizens. He's basically saying this policy of regime change in Venezuela, we are not going to do it. So there are a lot of things changing, but if you use the classical liberal and Marxist view to look at Trump, you won't understand all these things that I've just described. You won't understand it because if it's extreme right, you're against everything he does. If he brings in left-wing person to oversee the military-industrial complex, you won't understand it, and you will be against it, and you will be against the peace in Ukraine, and you will be against reducing military spending with 50%, which is nonsense. Okay, we'll see what topic will come up next week, depending on the development of coming week. If you want to support this channel, subscribe to it, share it with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussion groups, and if you want to make a donation, look at sandrohira.com how to do that. Thank you, and hope to see you next week.